Um, what was so good about this episode? Good is probably inappropriate, but basically, this episode is about a girl is about a girl whose dad dies of pancreatic cancer, and her mom then wastes all the insurance money paid out by the policy, and the family is in debt. And then her mom herself gets stage four, whatever cancer, colostomy cancer, which cancer itself, if you're a caregiver, is already like burdensome. And the fact that she then had to pay off all her parents' debt because she was a power of attorney. So I actually found this episode really useful, like in the sense that, it shows the realities of, I mean, she didn't really have an opportunity to care, but also, her circumstances are so much worse than mine. It's like, imagine having to deal with the emotional trauma of your parents dying and then having all of this financial burden. And the fact that, I don't know, from this person's account, she doesn't seem to have, like, when all of this was happening, she was still, trying to graduate from uni. And when I was at uni, I didn't really have all of these kind of concerns, and I didn't really have any of these things to worry about. So, like, yeah, so it kind of makes you feel like, okay, well, imagine if all of this had happened to me, like, how would that have affected my career? Like, I would for sure would say that it would probably have set me back. Like, I probably would have had to graduate uni a lot later, or like, who fucking cares about internships and grad jobs? Or it could have swung the other way, but it kind of makes you think that this is a very full on experience that other people are experiencing. So I think I will share a couple. And the way that Nora Borealis kind of tells the story is something that I found incredibly just, yeah, I really like the way she tells the story. So, if we listen to 2 to 4 minutes, uh, this part talks about, what is the value of, what do you see the value of kind of like $100?
Days had a predictable rhythm. Go to daycare while her parents work, come home after mom got back from work, and sit and listen to music while mom cooked, cleaned up.
I would sit and wait for my dad to get home, and I could always hear him like coming. And he'd get home, would come in and like his coveralls and like the very stereotypical like bend down and scoop me up and give me a hug. And like even like to this day, like I still remember what he smelled like when he walked through the door.
What did he smell like?
He smelled like he smelled like the inside of a garage. That like kind of I feel like the smell is oil and and hard work. It's like this smell that like is only with people that like work with engines and like work with their hands. It's like smell.
At home, dad took
We were all. I think I knew that some of my parents' friends tell that they had like more money, but it wasn't ever like we had a lack of money. It just didn't really get talked about.
at 10 when you're financially secure, or at least feel that way, when you don't have money troubles keeping your parents up at night, or you're not aware of them at least. $100 seems like a silly amount of money. You could buy like a million Polly Pockets, a bajillion lip smackers. Those are examples of what I was into at age 10 in the 90s. If they don't resonate with you, I'm sorry for the decade you were born in or how you were raised. $100 to a 10-year-old seems like it could be $1 million, or it could be just a piece of paper with a weird picture of an old white guy on it. So let's say we give your family $100. What would that have meant to your family, do you think?
Not a lot. Like,
Okay, so this is the way it sets up the story, because the central focus of this episode is on how this girl, like, money troubles are what punctuate the whole situation. Aside from the fact that both her parents die of cancer, stage 4 and stage 4 of cancer. So, yeah, so that it sets the tone, I think. And so this next part is it talks about her dad getting pancreatic cancer and dying of it, and them originally having plans to go to uh, camping, but then discovering that, this isn't possible. So, um, yeah, so let's have a listen to how the podcast talks about it.
Pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of,
and then
the family had just remodeled the kitchen, and one of mom's requests was a chalkboard.
my mom would sometimes write like, "Love you. We're gonna go camping for this 4th of July." My dad was wrong, and there was a little blank.
Courtney's dad in his coveralls, about to leave for work, wiping the chalkboard to reflect how much closer they were to a full week of nothing to do. Now imagine the date sticking there at however many nights left, because that countdown was interrupted.
So he started having symptoms over Memorial Day weekend. He had really bad stomach pain, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, "Well, you have ulcers. You've had ulcers before. You just have an ulcer." My dad was like, "I don't think so." And he's like, "No, it's an ulcer." He was like, "We'll treat your ulcers and you're going to be fine." And then he didn't get better. And then they started going to more doctors and more doctors. And like 4 weeks after his first symptom, they diagnosed him with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Stage 4 pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of 3%. It's according to the American Cancer Society. I feel like they'd know. That's not a lot of percents. So just a few weeks later, right before July 4th, it became clear that Courtney's dad was not going to be in that 3%.
It was like right around his birthday. He found out he was terminal, like, and there was nothing else they could do, and they were just gonna hospice, and that's it. And I remember that weekend, like, my dad had built this clothing line for my mom, and it was like on casters, so like you could roll it through the lawn. And I remember it wasn't quite finished, and my dad's best friend came over and like helped finish it. And I remember them like sailing it past my dad's window, like past his hospital bed. And I remember my dad laughing. And my dad did this thing where he like had everybody come in and he had like a last conversation with everybody. And it was like pretty clear that's what it was, but it wasn't acknowledged like going into it. It was just like, dad's just gonna talk to everybody. And I remember sitting there like with his arm around me, and he was like talking to me, and he's like, "I love you, and I'm so proud of you." Like, it was just such a nice conversation. And he's like telling me, it's gonna be okay and everything's gonna be fine, and I love you so much. And I remember feeling like so loved, and it was like just this perfect, nice conversation. I can remember everything so clearly. Like, I remember the night he died. I was still awake. I was in my room, and I was literally sitting at my window praying that God would make my dad better. And my mom yelled up the stairs, and all she said was Courtney, and I could tell in the way that her voice broke that he had died, and I yelled, and I was like, he's gone, isn't he? And she was like, yeah. And I went downstairs, and they called to have a nurse come over and like pronounce the time of death, and that was it.
That's it. Dad never got to take that camping trip. The countdown on the chalkboard never moved any closer. He died on July 5th at 11:59 p.m. The death of a person isn't just the death of a person, it's the loss of who you were in your world. Courtney has lost the smell of oil and hard work, that comforting presence who scooped her up every night in his arms, the man who counted down to a vacation with his family. Courtney's mom has lost her partner, the guy who fixed things and took care of things, who paid bills and balanced the checkbook. Sometimes you don't even notice the structure of your world until it crumbles. The same way you don't think about the stability of the ground beneath your feet until it wavers. The same way you don't think about the structure of your house until there's a crack in the foundation and all your furniture starts to just lean precariously to the south. There's nothing that shows you the fragility of the world you live in like having a pillar of that world knocked down. Courtney's dad was that pillar.
I always knew people liked my dad, and my dad had a lot of friends, and like anywhere we went.
So that's the part about her dad. So that's kind of ending. And then 17 minutes talks about later on, it talks about the fact that how is her mom doing at this time? And her mom's basically not doing very well, and her mom is um her mom is she's using a lot of money and she's not dealing with it very well. And that's the second part of the complication.
Much harder to fool your kid. Courtney knows that her mom is different now, that their life is different now. It's not that warm, joyful house anymore. It's lonely.
I mean, I would get home, I'd probably like read a book or get on the computer and play Sims, and we would just kind of like exist in the house together, but it's not like we like interacted. And then she'd be like, "You want to go get food?" And I'd be like, "Yeah," and we'd go get food, and then we'd come home and we'd go sit in separate places in the house and eat, and then I'd go to bed and I'd wake up the next morning and I would go to school and we'd do it all over again.
And then there's money. Courtney's mom was not working anymore, but she had gotten an undisclosed sum of money from her husband's life insurance policy. And she did what I know anecdotally a lot of people do in moments of deep, deep grief. She spent it.
She finished the kitchen remodel. She remodeled our bathroom. She got a new truck. We ate out all the time. All the time. She got really into those designer jeans with like the rhinestones on the butt. That was a big thing. She bought a lot of new clothes. She's going out a lot. She bought a permanent campsite, like with a permanent trailer at a local campground.
What your friend had.
Yes, what they had. Yeah, because she's always trying to catch up. We would go on like small vacations. Like, we'd like go to the Dells or, anything like that. She would like pay for my friends to do things with us. And the clothes, that's honestly like a really big one for me because I just remember like she always had new clothes, like always. And people would make comments about the fact that like that was pretty expensive for the kind of like class we were in. And so I knew that that was kind of like off, but also like, again, bills were being paid. So I was like, yeah, whatever.
Did you ever talk about money with your mom?
No, my mom would not talk about it. She wouldn't talk about it at all.
Why would her mom be spending money if she didn't have it? Money, Courtney understands, it's just not important to her mother. It doesn't mean anything. Tell me, what was your first job?
Uh, so it's actually a job that I still have and work on the weekends. I worked at the world's largest Culver's. So yeah, pretty cool. Pretty
I've been
cool.
there.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
Started when
Okay, so that's that part. And then it talks about like the episode goes on further to talk about the money troubles in detail that they'd been experiencing. And so, yeah, so that's one thing. So yeah, so it keeps on talking about that. And then they talk about yeah, so then at 38 minutes, kind of talks about, you know, her listening to her mom get cancer and the fact that, you know, all the money troubles associated with that. So yeah, let's have a listen.
have to pay my bills. And so if I let myself go into ruin in these 2 years, what am I gonna do?
This financial shell game, it consumes Courtney. For 2 years, she's keeping her mother afloat while also trying to keep herself from drowning. If she wasn't out making money, she was trying to figure out how to make money last. All day, every day, Courtney was thinking about money.
That was really stressful and really hard. And I didn't have time to like think about really anything else outside of like the money aspect of it. And it sucked because I was like, I'm the only person that can be responsible. And I'm also the only person that like I trust to be responsible for my mom's money. And there were people around my mom who would make comments to me like, you know, money isn't everything. And I was like, get fucked. Like, you don't really realize that that's not a choice for me. Like, I have to be there to take care of my mom's money because no one else is. And nobody's just going to sweep in and take care of it. Because if I stop paying for stuff, then what? They stop her treatment? Like, what happens?
Money isn't everything when you have money. When you don't, when you're living on the edge of survival, money means a whole hell of a lot more. There are actually several studies about this that always seem to be making the rounds on the internet, and the number varies from 60,000 to 95,000 US dollars per year. But researchers have basically found that, yeah, money does buy happiness. Not in the way that you might be thinking, but just making enough money not only to cover your own expenses, but also to plan for the future. It does make weathering the storms of life much easier. So think about that. If $60,000 a year buys happiness, it's also important to know that the median salary in the US is around $56,000 a year. We do have a government program called Medicaid that provides health coverage to millions of Americans, including eligible low income adults, children, pregnant women, elderly adults, people with disabilities. But to qualify for Medicaid, there's a cap on the amount of money that you can make. And for an individual, that cap is $17,236, which is not a lot of money. There's also research showing that many Americans don't have $400 to cover an unexpected emergency, which is kind of a dumb sentence because emergencies are always unexpected. The point is that the struggle of Courtney's is actually very, very common. This is a reality for a lot of people, including a lot of people listening to this show. most of us are actually much closer to the edge than we would care to admit. So Courtney's mom was on Medicare, which is similar to Medicaid, and also to qualify for Medicare, there's a limit on personal assets. If your bank account exceeds that amount, if you appear to make more than that limit, your benefits stop. Medicare is what made it possible for Courtney's mom to be in that nursing home. So when Courtney would get any cash injection, a small GoFundMe set up by friends, or that little check from her mother's long-term care insurance, she had to figure out how to use it without jeopardizing her mom's care.
So we got lucky. Her Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you make payments, and she had made the last payment before we sold the house, and that was strategic on my part. So we get a check, but I can't put it in her bank account because if she has money, her Medicare stops. And April 26th, they call me and they're like, your mom is actively dying. And I'm like, okay. And my first reaction is not to go to my mom. My first reaction is to figure out how I'm going to pay for stuff.
I've said before that it's a privilege to be allowed to grieve, a privilege to have the time and the space and the resources to sit in your pain, to sit with a loved one while they exit this world. But Courtney didn't have that privilege.
And so I get that check, get a couple other checks that had been just like hanging out. I go put it in her bank account and I call a funeral home. And I said, I need to come in to plan a funeral now, like right now. And they were like, okay, when can you come in? And I was like, literally whenever. And they were like, okay, tomorrow morning you have an appointment. And so then I went and saw my mom, and you know, she had started like the active dying process. And I was there, I stayed, you know, and I went home and woke up the next morning and I went and I prepaid for a funeral, and I spent every dollar she had until she had $3.64 in her bank account. And then I went and sat with my mom while she died. And I had a conversation with her. I held her hand and I said, you know, I'm going to be okay, because if you taught me literally anything, it's how to be okay. But, you know, even like that moment, that time that I should have just been like sitting with my mom, I was sitting there trying to figure out, like, how do I pay for this stuff?
Courtney's mom died, and in the end, all that was left was $3.64. But her mother's death wasn't the end of Courtney's responsibilities. Her mother's funeral wasn't even the end, because having power of attorney means that you are responsible for settling the decedent's estate. Don't love the word decedent. There are states with filial laws where children are responsible for their dead parents' debt, but Wisconsin is not one of those states. But still, there's a whole part of dying that involves other people proving that you're dead and proving what assets you had or did not have when you died. So that's what Courtney had to do after that prepaid funeral was over.
And it just kept going because she's on Medicare and she had to like prove all her assets, and then any money that she did get or any checks that came in after she died, all of that needed to be paid back to the state. But it just dragged on for months and months and months, and it finally gets settled, and you know, everything's paid back, and they send me this letter, and I still have that letter, and I'm keeping it because I intend to frame it someday and put it on the wall, because that's probably the most relief I've ever felt in my life, was to get this letter that said, like, you don't have to deal with this anymore. You don't have to be responsible for your mom and for her money and for everything else. And like, that was when I finally got to move on, was not when she died, but when her estate was settled. You know, that was when I got to move on. I want to plan more. I want to think more in the long term, because my mom was pretty good about like, how can we make it day to day? And I want to be.
Yeah, and so that's that part of it.